So you want to master business? Well, you can either spend 150 grand at an MBA or 15 minutes a day, just read this. With that, this is Josh Kaufman's Personal MBA. All right, welcome back everybody to Biz Gorilla. I'm your host, Jason Catalano, call sign Wildcat. And today's a really good one. I got a book summary of the Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman, and this is one of my favorite books of all time. With this, I would definitely say who's it for? It's for anybody who's a business student or anyone who's a scientist, an engineer, artist, creator, anything like that. If you're wondering what makes up business, right? What is business truly at its core? From a high level, start with this book. That's who this is for. And with that, what's in the book itself is really 3 different layers. And layer 1 has to do with, the basics of business. I call it Business 101. Layer 2 has to do with business psychology and dealing with the self. And then layer 3 has to do with systems, business systems. How do you get a business to take an input? What are the systems that take that input and give you that great output? With that, I would also say, where do we see this book? We see this book pretty much everywhere. Everywhere you go to, especially big business, you see it all the time in terms of just the day-to-day interactions. What is the language being used? And I think especially for like small business owners, contractors, side business owner, you may be someone who loves to cook and you have a cooking channel. How are you going to do business with people? How are you going to talk to, brands? How are you going to get those sponsorships? Well, once again, that's where we go about how. This book goes over it in terms of the actual language you need to be using and what you need to be thinking about in terms of better business practices. So the big idea with this book is that Josh Kaufman says that you can replace a 150 grand MBA with a $15 book, and it's the same thing, knowledge-wise. And it's a great big idea, it's very ambitious, and I think he accomplishes a lot of it. I myself have an MBA, University of Arizona, go Cats, and he does a really good job. Obviously at an actual MBA program, you spend a lot of time with case studies and, you have professors and you have other great business minds that you can lean on and talk with and go over problem, solutions. But this book, in terms of just the knowledge of what you need to study, it's all boiled down. 400 pages or so, it's all boiled in there. And so I definitely think in terms of the big idea, he hits a gold there. So in part 1, where he really goes in the business basics, Business 101, and he talks about 5 different, parts of any business, right? Number 1, you have to create value, and this is, think about an R&D department, engineers, product, development. Someone like Ryan Holiday would say, your marketing team should be in that phase as well, so that when you're building a product, you already know how to market it. Versus the other way around. But this is the actual value creation. And how do you actually create value for people? What do they want? What do they need? What do they aspire to be? How are you gonna help them get there? And that's really that phase. And then he talks about, okay, once you get that done, you have to attract customers, right? And you gotta get them to the door. That's marketing. Then he says, once you got them to the door, you have to convert them, right? Just because you walk someone to the door, you then have to be able to get them to be a customer. Peter Drucker talks about it, he talks about it in here, create a customer. That's what businesses are all about. And so he goes into all the great sales tactics and everything for creating a customer and getting that sale. Okay, so now that you got the handshake, the next phase is you got to actually deliver the value, right? Especially on the service end, this is a very important chapter in terms of, how are you actually going to not just meet expectation, but you got to go above and beyond. Guys like Jason Capital talk about it all the time. You take someone out on a date, you got to give them, not just the meal and pay for a meal, but you gotta wine and dine them. You gotta give them the wine, and you gotta give them the chocolate, and you gotta give them more than what they expect. And so this is really just talking about how do you not only deliver value, but greatly meet their expectations so that they can get back and give you referrals and everything to get back into your marketing and sales loop. That way you don't have to always acquire a customer. Your customers can start acquiring customers for you. Then number 5 has to do with finance, and mostly just your job in business. You gotta go through the financials, right? Money flows through a business, and that's kind of one of the biggest goals. How much money do you take? What's your net profit? Where are you getting money from? What's your cash flow situation look like? do you have to go a lot of loans? Do you have to give up equity to get money for bootstrapping? Can you go through GoFundMe, things like that? That's what that chapter is really talking about, is what are the key performance indicators, what are the key financial metrics. So part two has to do with, human psychology, self-development, and he talks about working with the self, working with others, and then he also talks about the human mind. And one thing I really learned actually in this part, Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, goes over it too, but he talks about having a reference level and understanding what are people's reference level. And when I first thought about it, I was like, oh, what is he talking about reference level? Like, what's the anchor point, things like that. But what he's really saying is we all have a reference of what normal is, what's within our left-right boundaries of normal. And if something falls within that left-right boundary, we figure it's not a threat, it's not something that's an opportunity, it's not something that I really need to pay attention to because I pretty much have already gone over it. And so our brains just go, you know what, cool story, but next thing. And you have to understand, what is your customer's reference level? Are you talking to people that, just from a psychology perspective, they've never seen online marketing? Or are these people who are pretty well versed in it and they're trying to go to the next level? What's that reference point? Because that's going to determine your copywriting, that's going to determine how you speak to them, that's going to determine what medium, what mode you use. And that really kind of is something I think about a lot that came from this book, was what is the reference level of people you're talking with? And when he talks about, working with yourself, he's saying to think is easy, to act is hard, but to act on your thoughts is the hardest thing of all. And it's very, very true. And one of the things, especially with this channel, with the book summaries, is we can't fall in the trap of loving the knowledge without execution. You gotta have skills, you gotta have a place to put this to action. So act on it. Part 3 has to do with business systems, and honestly, this part of the book it's not the most entertaining. It's important. It's kind of the engineer part of Josh coming out here, and it's just understanding some basic things about a business. Is that a business is just interconnectivity of a lot of systems, and how do those systems connect? And then within those systems, how do you get optimization? How do you get things like adaptability, right? Things change. Does your system adapt to it or not? Business is about heading into uncertainty. You can make it $100,000 a month for 5 years, and all of a sudden, boom, social media comes through and you gotta adapt, and your systems have to be able to adapt with it. And so that's what he's talking about, how your systems adapt to it. And he's just talking about, understanding your systems truly, what is the goal of each system, and understanding all the mechanics of your systems, and then analyzing it to see how you can improve it, right? And so those last few chapters just deal with systems. And honestly, if you don't really have your own business, that part's really, really good. If you're working at a bigger business and you're trying to fine tune, you can add a lot of value to a business just by understanding how those mechanics of those systems work. And so with that is the summary of the Personal MBA. Personally, I would give this a grade of 97.5. One of my favorite business books. This is one you should be reading about 15 minutes a day. Just skim through it. If you guys aren't really sure how it works, not a lot of pictures, but it's just got a lot of valuable data in it. It's got a lot of lists, a lot of quotes, and it's just business as a whole wrapped into one book. So with that, I definitely recommend Personal MBA. This is a top 5 business book for me. Go ahead and get it yourself. And with that, this is Biz Gorilla signing off.